Hello, I'm Rain Phoenix, and you're watching our Saturday series, We the People, an intentional space for conversation about politics, activism, and our shared humanity, a space for political candidates, artists, and activists to discuss the many issues facing our world. Today, we have a very special guest, Valarie Kaur, author and founder of Revolutionary Love. She's here to talk about the People's Inauguration, and we have artist, writer, documentary filmmaker, Katie Davison. Most recently, her film, The Soul of America, is available on HBO. Welcome to the show, beautiful women. I'm so happy to have you. Valarie, I want to jump right in and ask you about your experience of January 6th during the riots and looting of the Capitol. What was your personal experience of that?
I just want to say thank you so much. It feels so healing to be here with you both. I feel like I haven't been able to take a deep breath since January 6th. My brother-in-law was trapped in the Capitol during the storming of the Capitol, and he's a reporter for CNN, so he was trapped in his office, continuing to report. And in the meantime, when he was texting us to tell us he was okay, but then we would, hear silences and then hear his voice on the screen again and then know that he was still okay. It was such a harrowing day for our family. We were all on the phone with each other. My hands were shaking. I was sobbing. And only when he was finally evacuated and he was safe, he's a reporter who is also brown. So we could only imagine what they would have done if they had found him. Only when he was safe did I realize that I was feeling terror in my body, and that terror was familiar. That how many times in the last 20 years have I seen people I love in harm's way in the face of white supremacist terror? And that even though it's unprecedented to see that kind of insurrection in the U.S. Capitol building, the experience of white supremacist terror is as old as this country. So my internal reckoning is like, well, what do we do now? What do we do with something that has at one point been as ancient as this country, but as also surging to the extent that continuing as a democracy is at stake? And so that brings me to the offering that we're making, that those of us who believe in the idea of a multiracial America where a family like mine could belong, those of us who believe in dignity and justice and truth and equality, those of us who want a nation where all of our children are safe, it's up to us to be louder than ever before, to be braver than ever before with our voices. We can't let fear paralyze us. And I know that we're still hearing ongoing threats of violence as we're nearing Inauguration Day. And I say this is the time for those of us who stand in love to show up now.
I'm thinking about your book, Valarie, which I just finished recently, and it's so incredibly powerful and moving, See No Stranger. And in it, you talk about revolutionary love. And it's such a powerful concept and so relevant to what you just recounted your experience was in the Capitol. I mean, it's so relevant and so feels a lot like what you were going through in the aftermath of 9/11. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about what revolutionary love is and like how we can embrace love in this moment as an antidote to what we're going through as a nation.
Oh, revolutionary love is love without limit. It's love without limit. It's the kind of love we've heard on the lips of, spiritual teachers and social reformers through the centuries. It's this idea that I can look upon the face of anyone and say, you are a part of me I do not yet know. And that kind of love, is dangerous because if I see you as a part of me I do not yet know, then I have to let your grief into my heart. I have to stand up for you when you are in harm's way. I have to fight for you in the face of injustice. And so entire nonviolent movements have been built on that ethic of love. It's always disrupted society. And the audacity to show up with that kind of love for even our opponents. I mean, right now it's really, really hard. When at the end of that day, when my brother-in-law Manu was finally safe and we could breathe, my teammate called me, and she's been with me building the Revolutionary Love Project for the last 4 years. And she told me, she was so sorry to tell me that, she said, my parents were in front of the Capitol building, part of the protests. And so here I was, my brother-in-law was inside, and the parents of this woman who means the world to me were on the outside. And as much as I want to see them as monsters and as my oppressors committing evil, as much as I want to hate them, my dearest friend wouldn't exist without them. And she helps me see them as not monsters. She helps me see them as deeply wounded. They have been fed misinformation. They have been made to believe that an election was stolen from them. They have been made to believe that a nation that would have my family as part of it means taking power away from them, and it means their own oppression. I mean, those kinds of lives, that's a painful way to live. And she helps me see their wound. That so much of white nationalist aggression comes from unresolved grief. They're grieving the notion that this country ever belonged just to them in the first place. And someone has to tend to those wounds. Someone has to tend to that grief. It's probably not me in this moment. They'll probably not listen to me, but they might listen to their daughter. So when I call for revolutionary love, this idea of seeing no stranger, that every person is a person, it's an invitation to see our wounds and our woundedness. And it's an invitation to imagine that every one of us has a different role in the labor of love. Revolutionary love is loving others, our opponents, and ourselves. And so there are those of us who just need to love ourselves hard right now, reckon with our trauma and our pain and our grief. That's where I'm at. There are those of us who can reach out in solidarity and help others in harm's way. And that's the love, so much love I've received in the last week has been that kind of love. And then there are those of us who might be in a position to reach out to those opponents, like my friend, reaching out to her parents and sit with them and try to love them into a process of transformation. I think the only way we will survive as a nation is if all of us begin to imagine our part in that labor, in that long labor.
Do you think that this kind of revolutionary love, like what I hear you saying, is that it's something we can cultivate, not only for victims and people we identify with, but also for oppressors?
Yeah, oftentimes when I talk about love for our oppressors or love for our opponents, people are like, the audacity of that? Like, you want me to look up at my oppressor and try to love them? And the first thing I say is, like, if you have a knee on your neck right now, it's not necessarily your role to look up at that oppressor and wonder about them. Your job is to stay alive, right? That's loving yourself well enough. But if we can give those people who are safe enough or brave enough permission to do that labor, we need them. And if you listening feel like, okay, I know the uncle, I know the relative, I know the friend, but I feel the revulsion in my body, I can't feel anything for them. I want to say to you, you don't have to feel anything. It doesn't have to begin with compassion. It doesn't even have to begin with empathy. It has to begin with wonder. That wonder is the first and primal act in loving anyone. Anyone. I mean, when I have to figure out how to love my son, my daughter each day, they're changing so fast. What do they need? What do they need now? I have to wonder about them. What does it mean to wonder about people who do monstrous things? It's cultivating the kind of curiosity to draw close to their story. Beneath the slogans and the sound bites, we begin to hear their story. Why do they feel that way? What makes them cling to those narratives? What are they missing? What are they grieving? What are they needing? And once we hear someone's story like that, we see them as a full human being. And Katie, it's not just a moral act to try to love our opponents. It's a strategic act. Because the more I can understand my opponents, the more I can understand the 70 million people who voted against me or my values, the more I can understand the people in front of the Capitol, the smarter I am as an activist. for what can I do to hold up a vision of an America that they can see themselves in, so they're not so afraid of how this country is changing. I feel like that's the work of the next 4 years.
That's so profound. And that's exactly leading to the burning question I have, which is, what is the People's Inauguration?
Yes! Yes! I've been thinking about this a lot. On January 20th, no matter what, we will see a transfer of power, and we will see a new president and a historic vice president take an oath of office. And I keep thinking, if only one person makes a commitment or two leaders, we're not going to get very far. So many of us celebrated. I mean, I was actually at President Obama's inauguration. I mean, I was this big, sitting at the foot of the Washington Monument, but I was there. And I remember the celebration in the air and this feeling of culmination and completion. And then we were like, yay. And then we went home. How many of us went home? We treated Obama's presidency as the end of white supremacy in America instead of our first real opportunity to dismantle it. I think what the last 4 years have taught so many of us, we're awake now. We're awake at what we're dealing with. And the idea that, all of us have a role. Each and every one of us has a role in healing and transitioning this country. So the People's Inauguration, on January 20th, we will celebrate the work of democracy. And then on January 21st, we are inviting people to join us in a People's Inauguration. We, the people, need to be inaugurated into the work of healing and transitioning, reimagining, and rebuilding this country. And so we're inviting people to post their own visions, their own songs and stories and music and art, their visions for what America could be. We're inviting people to take a people's oath. We've taken the words from the Constitution and reworked them into a people's oath. What does it mean for you to recommit to our values like dignity and justice and joy? We're inviting people to do this in community. We have templates for you to take your children around the dinner table and have this experience with them, or do this with your faith communities or your students in your virtual classroom. And we're inviting people to stay with us and go on a journey with us. So over the next 10 days after the 21st, I'll be hosting a series of conversations with some of the greatest visionaries, movement leaders, healers of our time. And then we're going to hold people together over the next year. You made a commitment. All right. How do we keep showing up together? So folks can find any of this at thepeoplesinauguration.org. And it's really the attempt to say, how do we step into this new era, not just resisting, not just focused on what we're fighting against, but what we're fighting for, what we're reimagining and building together.
What I love about this so much is how it dovetails with this idea of revolutionary love, like the power of commitment. When you take it into your own life, you're never powerless, and I see this oath that everybody's taking as this collective journey to take the power back, and reestablish bonds of community. I'm so excited. So what can we artists do to help you? What should these posts look like? And tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, I invite you to look at the words of the People's Oath and let it spark your imagination. Katie, you introduced us to filmmakers who created a beautiful video of the People's Oath. I know we're going to have artists offering their songs and their music. We're going to have visual artists posting their artwork around it. Take that People's Oath and let it just ignite your own imagination, and let it inspire you to say, okay, what am I ready to commit to, and how do I want to express it, and how do I want to bring people together around justice and also healing and joy. So inviting, the People's Inauguration really means this is yours. And all we have to do is just raise our voices in one beautiful chorus. And perhaps if we do that together on the 21st, we can start to create the kind of cultural shift that so many of us are longing for.
Beautiful. And I think you mentioned it before. We can go to thepeoplesinauguration.org.
Yes, and we have a whole template for artists. So we have templates for educators, for faith leaders, for students, for families, and for artists.
One of the things I've heard you talk about that I think would be nice to hear again is the 3.5% of a population, what that power of intentionality and getting everybody on board. I mean, it feels like there could be a shift if everybody were to do this on the 21st. at the same time. I mean, do you think?
Yeah, that's what we're longing for, right? Something that you can feel in your body. How do I feel? I've been holding my body. I haven't been able to take a deep breath since January 6th, or maybe even the last 4 years, or maybe even longer, since 9/11. Like, I have just been in crisis response mode for so much of my life. But what does it mean to take this opportunity we now have of more space and more spaciousness and say, okay, we still have crises to respond to, but there's more time and space here now to rebuild, to reimagine from where we are. I'm going to feel differently in my body. How do I step into that? And so I've been looking at this amazing data on social change, and Harvard researchers have shown us that when 3.5% of a population engages in a nonviolent action, it creates a change throughout an entire society. So in the United States, that's around 11 million people. So if we could inspire, catalyze, touch 11 million people starting January 21st to enter this together, like, is that the kind of sea change that we can start to feel and live into in the coming year?
Woo!
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing with us about the People's Inauguration and your journey. Is there anything you want to leave with us?
Oh, I just want to acknowledge again, like, my loves, if you are feeling like you're hearing all this and you want to feel it, you want to believe it, but God, you feel that trauma in your body still. You feel all the grief from the massive loss of life from this pandemic and from what we're seeing in our nation. Or maybe you just feel rage. You're just like, I have so much fury inside of me. I want to say that there is a place for all of that in the labor of love. You know, how do we be brave with our grief? How do we harness our rage? And then how do we still, think I still have a role to play. I still have a part to play. And I want to show up for myself, and I want to show up for my babies, and I want to show up for my family, and I want to show up for, for my life, like how that, I just want to say, no matter where you are, no matter what you're feeling, there's a place for you, and we need you. And the only way we can handle this much pain that we're all feeling is if we do it together. So the People's Inauguration is a way to touch that pain and sit with it and then hold it in community and say, all right, we're going to breathe through this together and we're going to move through this together, and here's where we're going.
Thank you. Thank you for your inspiration.
You all heard this idea when it was just an idea in my head like 3 months ago. And here you are with your music, with your voice, with your filmmaking, with your artistry, with your storytelling. You have helped bring all of this to life. And I'm just so excited to see it spread.
Thank you for your inspiration, your book, See No Stranger, The Revolutionary Love Project, and now the People's Inauguration. I feel like I had such great luck or karma or whatever you want to call it to come into contact with you and be able to be a part of your journey, because it's all of our journeys together, Yeah.
I feel the same. I am so grateful to each of you. I can't wait to journey with you for many, many years to come.